Hey guys, Civilord here, back again with another review, and today we'll be taking a look at the NECA Toys Disney Gargoyles Ultimate Thailog. And before we get into it, let us first take a look-see at both the front and the back of the packaging. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now before we get into the meat and taters of this review, Thailog here does come with a plethora of accessories. First up, Thailog comes with two pairs of hands, the first of which being a pair of claw hands to tear you a new one. Then a pair of fist hands to punch your freaking lights out. As well as a flare gun with detachable flare and hand sculpted specifically to grip onto it. Next up, he comes with an opening and closing briefcase full of cash and some keys, but it is worth noting that he can't really hold onto this, but it looks nice nonetheless. And last, but certainly not least, Thailog does include this absolutely massive blast effect that can attach to both the flare gun itself and the flare which just detaches from the flare gun, as I said before. But man, does this thing take up a ton of real estate. I could say personally that I won't be using this on my display, but I gotta give kudos to anyone who does, because this thing is absolutely 100%, no questions asked, a total space killer. That said, I kind of would have preferred if this thing was half the size and we got an extra head for Thailog, because that's really the only thing we are missing for him, is a repaint of the more aggressive looking Goliath head. What do you guys think? But with that being said, it's time now that we move on to the aesthetics and articulation. Taking a closer look at Thailog here, and much like I did before in my Goliath review, I'm going to be keeping the wings off this guy until we move on to size comparisons, just so he's not as cumbersome to move around, which, given the fact that those things take up quite a bit of real estate, should be relatively understandable. But with that being said, of the two figures we have in this NECA Gargoyles line at this current time, I think this guy is the better of the two figures. He comes with more accessories. The overall quality of this figure is a little bit better, with the exception of this knee here, which I'll talk about in a minute. I really dig this figure, even though he is essentially a repaint of Goliath with a new head, which, look at that. Look at that face. He is one mean SOB, and he knows it. That's a bad mofo right there. I bet he's totally okay with that, though. That said, looking at this figure in these colors, with the kind of bluish, purplish shading and the black skin underneath, and just the size and proportions of it, I'm seeing Blackheart here. Anyone else seeing that? I think this is the perfect base for a custom Blackheart. All you'd have to do is remove the loincloth, maybe plug in the holes on the back, and try and track down that old Toy Biz Marvel Legends Blackheart and swap that head on. I think you have the potential for a really solid Blackheart figure here, which is more than Hasbro's given us right now, unfortunately. Though it is the 50th anniversary of Ghost Rider, would be really nice to see that, and a Mephisto, and as I always say, another Danny Ketch Ghost Rider. But I'm getting on a tangent here. I don't want to do that. It's about Thailog, who is awesome. I love this figure, man. And yes, it is a repaint of Goliath. I get it. But that's what Thailog is. He is a clone of Goliath with kind of the intelligence of David Xanatos, created by Dr. Anton Zavarius, voiced by the one and only Tim Curry. Which, can we get him at some point? Be really cool to get an Anton Zavarius as well. But I'm not going to make this a wish list video. We need to focus on Thailog here. So, with that being said, as far as articulation goes, this guy, he can look down. He can look back up quite a bit. He has a tendency to look down a bit, though. which doesn't bug me too much because he is a taller character, so he's going to be looking down on most people anyways. Am I just making excuses because I love this line and I want to see it do as well as it possibly can because I want all the other figures I've shown? Yeah, probably. I'm not going to lie. I am very biased towards Gargoyles. It is my favorite animated series of all time, that is. But I don't think that's that bad. I've seen worse. He can also tilt a little bit and look side to side, of course. Shoulders go out to the side, back down. He's got a bicep swivel. Double joint at the elbow here, which this guy follows the same trend as Goliath. He's got super tight joints, but I didn't need to heat anything up. So that is very, very nice. He does have the clawed hands on him at the moment because that's how he was packaged. That's how he's going to stay for the majority of this review until we get to final thoughts. But they do have the rotation and hinge built into them there. I will say I wish the hand that came with the flare gun, or was made for the flare gun, did have the vertical hinge instead of the horizontal hinge like the rest of the hands, but I'll let that slide. I'm going to display him with that regardless. And then this is the area right here that has had the most improvements. The torso joint. Oh, it's so nice and tight. I love it. I love it. But you can crunch up and down and rotate side to side as well as tilt, but I don't want to knock it out of the sweet spot I got it in. It does have some loose points, don't get it twisted, but it is a lot better than the Goliath figure was, so I appreciate that quite a bit. It's nice to see that NECA is tweaking the molds to make them a little bit better as opposed to just letting them degrade over time. He also has a waist swivel. I haven't mentioned that yet, even though I have been kind of using it a little bit here. But getting his arm out of the way. His hips do move out to the side. They move back down. Forward and back. Not as tight as Goliath's, but still tight. They get the job done. He has a thigh cut as well. Rotation in the knee as well as a single hinge in the knee. So you can get him in that appropriate gargoyle stance. Which is this, for those of you who are newbies to gargoyles and don't know how they stand. He'd also have a hinge in the foot as well as a rocker. And then he also has a hinge in the toe with its own rocker, so you can get him planted flat on the floor. I will say, on top of the fact he has peg holes on the bottom of the feet, which if you have any McFarlane stands, those do work really well on this guy. I tend to use the flight stand so I can rotate that clip around and have it wrap around their waist so they don't fall down. But I will say, getting back to this knee here, we did have to put some Elmer's glue on this. And by we, I mean me and Mr. Brian, a.k.a. my dad, a.k.a. the old man. And I gotta tell you, night and day difference. This thing could not stand to save its life before, and he stands no problem now. And I gotta give a shout out to my buddy Toy Nuts, a.k.a. Mr. Brian Starner, the Strootle Man, for the heads up on that tip, because it saves money, first and foremost, because I didn't have to hunt down a replacement that could stand. And it is super effective, so I may have to hit some of my Motu Origins with that at some point. Skelegod, since we're on the topic of Motu at the moment. But on top of all that, he does have the hinge in the tail with the rotation. And it's got the bendy wire in it, so you can pose it however you want. Maybe heat that up before you try it, but I didn't have to do that. Again, your results may vary, but what an awesome figure, man. I love this guy. This is my figure of the year so far. I know it's only, February? I don't care. This guy's awesome. It's Thailog. It's the first time we've ever gotten a Thailog, which is weird because Kenner was known for repaints back in the day. I mean, just look at all the Batmen we used to get. Or you guys used to get. I'm not quite old enough for that, but I have had my fair share of Batman variants in my time. But considering the fact that this guy's literally just a repaint of Goliath, I'm surprised we didn't get any Thailog figures in that old Kenner line, especially since we got figures that were really close to Thailog. There's even some that have armor like Thailog did later on in the series, but what are you going to do? What's done is done, and it does not matter, it's in the past. That said, I am curious what the holdup with Demona in this line is. I think she was supposed to be second, then this guy, then Bronx. I'm hoping NECA's just kind of tweaking some things before they put that figure out, because she is a little bit thinner. She's not as big and bulky as Goliath and Thailog here, because she is a female figure, and as a character, she's just not built super jacked. So hopefully they're just kind of tightening things up, making it so she can be a stable figure, because that's my one qualm with any figure line. If they can't stand, they ain't worth it. But with that being said, let us throw the wings on this guy before we move on to some size comparisons. And as promised, here is a closer look at the mighty Thailog, fully assembled with his absolutely massive wings, which, much like the Goliath figure that precedes him, these things take up oh so much space. Just look at the size of these things. I mean, you're probably used to it by now if you have the Goliath figure, but having two of these now? Yeesh! That Bronx figure can't come out soon enough, can it? But with that being said, I gotta tell you, looking at him with his wings now, I see a custom Chernabog base if anyone's interested in trying that out. I think this guy would be really fitting for that, because much like Thailog, Chernabog from the Disney movie Fantasia, also Disney, funny enough, but Chernabog from the Disney movie Fantasia is also a big demonic gargoyle-esque character. I believe that is a deity of Slavic mythology, basically the devil. So if you wanted to, I would say pick a second one of these up if you want to make a custom Chernabog. That'd be pretty sweet. I'd like to see it. Let me know if you do it. Hit me up on Instagram and show me pics of that, because I'm waiting for Super 7 to make a Chernabog figure, and that hasn't happened yet. Not to mention, this guy has the perfect face for it with that evil smile. That said, though, taking a look-see here at Thailog with his wings, they have the hinges on the back, of course, which I'm going to tell you right now, much like the Goliath figure, I did have Mr. Brian, aka my dad, aka the old man, heat and lubricate these up a bit so they aren't as stiff in the hinge department. But of course you can hinge them back, and you can also rotate them a little bit, but I wouldn't advise doing that because you will stretch that port out and they will get loose over time. That said, thanks to this guy's slightly, well, not even slightly, much tighter torso joint, he's not wobbling all over the place like Goliath was in my review of that figure. So with that being said, I don't want to dilly-dally any more than I already have. Kind of went on a tangent with that whole Chernabog thing, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Let us now take a look at some size comparisons. First up, here is Thailog next to one of two Goliath figures from the original Kenner Gargoyles line that closely resemble him, the first of which being the Quick Strike Goliath, the second of which being the Mighty Roar Goliath. Next up, here he is alongside the only other figure we've received in this NECA Gargoyles line, Goliath. And last, but certainly not least, we have our two regulars, the Mythic Legion's Brother Mandibulus, the of Spawn, who, do I even need to say it? Just look at how small he is next to Thailog here. But, with that being said, time to wrap things up, some final thoughts. Overall, and while I do understand that this is a cheap and easy repaint of the previously released Goliath figure, I'm still going to stand by it and say that this is the better of the two figures, at least as far as quality goes. For me personally, your results may vary, but as far as I'm concerned, this is the superior figure. Aside from the one knee joint on mine, which, again, working on it. The joints on this guy are super solid, and the wings were not as difficult to kind of free up as Goliath's were. So with that being said, I would suggest you give this guy a chance because we've never gotten a Thailog figure in the life of Gargoyles as far as action figures go. Even back in the old Kenner days, we only had the Quick Strike Goliath and Mighty Roar Goliath, which were close to Thailog, but at the end of the day, they were just more Goliath variants. We've never had a Thailog figure before, and that is something I am super stoked to finally be adding to my Gargoyles collection. So, with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. And if you are so inclined, please don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you know whenever I upload more reviews like this one. And if you haven't already, please hit me up on Instagram at Overlord Productions. But as always, keep the comments civil. The world sucks enough as it is. And until next time, I'll catch you guys later.